This is our quarterly presentation on an overview of the Ho Chi Minh City office market for quarter 4 and also our outlook for 2015. So the theme for today is an overview of the market, but also an update on some new strategies that many office tenants are looking at, different workplace strategies, designs, and also a lot of office tenants are going green, which is looking at more energy efficient office spaces and office designs, which makes their office space and their environment a little bit more productive and effective. So before we get into the office market update and talk about the different rental levels and vacancy rates, a quick overview on the theme for today, workplace strategy. We're seeing the workplace change very much away from an office where there's a lot of paper, there's a lot of desks, to a more open-based environment, especially with technology now. People can really work anywhere, either inside the office, in a meeting room, with Wi-Fi, laptops, iPhones. So we're starting to see a shift away from different types of standard process of office space to a more flexible type environment, where really a lot of this new flexibility in workspace and new strategy, a lot of it is driven by technology. And when we speak about workplace strategies, this is just one of the examples of what we call a new 360-degree workplace strategy, which many companies are adopting. This is actually our office in Singapore. And what we managed to do was reduce the amount of headcount space. We reduced the amount of office space by 30% by having a more open and collaborative environment. So what we did was people didn't have a workstation. So whoever came in first to a certain bench or a workspace had more meeting rooms and more open space. So you see the main purpose of an office is for people to perform and be more productive. So what actually happened in this situation, we found that 80% of staff collaboration had improved. So they were collaborating more. 92% of people said it improved their ability to work in teams or smaller teams. 72% said their ability to focus had improved. We found that 43% of people had more spaces to meet, more areas to talk and share ideas. And more importantly, 69% of the staff said they got to better know their colleagues. So a lot of this change in work environment leads to more productivity, and that's part of the reason of the shift we're starting to see from many occupiers take on these types of strategies. It's not just about cost saving, it's about increasing performance of the staff as well. So we speak a little bit about new workplace strategies. Another trend that we're starting to see in the workplace is green leases. What is a green lease? It's really just an environmental standard that many developers and tenants are taking at the moment. So it's really a standard lease where both the tenant and the developer agree on some green issues, whether it's about power, usage, waste disposal. So this is something we're seeing a lot more of today. You know, it's interesting if we speak about, there's different types of environmental accreditations for different buildings. In Vietnam, there's something called LEED. There's another one called Lotus. There's different forms, but one of the things to bear in mind here, there are 20, to give you a background, 27 environmentally accredited or green projects in Vietnam at the moment. 25 more are under construction. And of those 25 and 27, 40% are factories and 30% of them are office developments. So this is something that many multinationals now are looking to do, not just in manufacturing, but also in office space. So while it's very new to Asia, we're starting to see more of this in Vietnam. So you can see it's occurring. There's some successful examples in places like Singapore. We're seeing it more in markets like Hong Kong and Australia. But it is coming in Vietnam, and it's not just from developers, it's also with tenants as well. So that's just an overview on some of the trends we're starting to see, from environmentally friendly buildings and leases to new workplace strategies and more efficient space. So hopefully that's part of the theme of what we're sharing with some of these tenants. But what we're also doing is, more importantly, giving an update on the office market. Where's rent? Where's vacancy? Where do we see things going next year? So to set the tone here, this is, on this side here is average asking rent, vacancy rate. So grade B and grade A, so you can see the trend since 2011. I came to Vietnam in 2011. It was a very difficult time. One of the things which is quite interesting, you can see the average asking rent in Ho Chi Minh City, very different if you look at this in Hanoi. But in Ho Chi Minh City, average rents have been fairly stable for the last 3 years. And a lot of this is due to supply and demand. You can see that really not until 6 months ago, I look out the window now, I see probably 5 or 6 cranes. If we did this about 8 months ago, we wouldn't see as many cranes because a lot of development has started again. So the last 3 years, a lot of the office development was very tight. There weren't many new projects. Where we are today, Vincom Centre, just finished in 2010, so it was one of the largest buildings that have been completed in the last 4 years. But the key point is, see, over the past year and the past 3 years, the average rents have remained quite stable. And you can see what's interesting about that is there haven't been many buildings coming online. As you know, we had 20% inflation in 2011. There was restrictions on lending to the real estate sector. So what they did, they kept supply stable. So a lot of this excess supply, when some of the big buildings came online in 2010, has started to be absorbed. So now we have quite a healthy vacancy rate of just under 10% for grade A office buildings, and almost the same for grade B, and a stable rental level. So this year we've started to see the market correct itself. So again, this is important to note because the reality is, although vacancy has been dropping, rents have remained stable. What we've noticed is in the past year, net absorption, which is really the take-up of office space or the demand for office space, is almost half what it was last year. So demand for office space has dropped for various reasons, because of the macroeconomic situation, demand locally not being so strong. So a lot of office developers have been in quite a good position the last 12 months because there hasn't been many new buildings. Demand has softened up, but because of the lack of supply, a lot of the space has been taken up. They're very important to see. There's been less deals or less tenants taking space this year than last year. So the question is, what will happen next year? So I can't exactly answer your question to tell you exactly what will happen next year. But one of the key things to highlight in terms of next year is, again, a lot like this year, there is not much new office supply coming online in terms of grade A office buildings. There is one new grade A building coming online in the CBD, Vincom Tower. There is other buildings coming online around the CBD, but not much new supply in 2015. The next big wave of supply is going to be 2016, 2017, where we see many of the larger buildings under construction now starting to come up. And that's why we expect to see buildings like Vincom Centre, CBD buildings, reasonably priced with availability, showing strong demand because tenants have limited options. Just a quick overview, we talk about tenants. This year, of the 178 transactions that CBRE tracked, 19% were in the banking, finance and insurance sector. We also saw a large growing area in sourcing and outsourcing. A part of this is because of new trade agreements and legislative changes. So there's been a new agreement coming called TPP. It's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It should come in this year, which means there's going to be open free trade between a number of markets and Vietnam. Because of that, we've seen major sourcing companies coming to Vietnam. So very different to what you would see in other markets like Hong Kong. One of the biggest sectors here really remains insurance, finance, but also sourcing and outsourcing, as well as pharmaceutical. So the interesting part we mentioned before, the trend. You can see in 2012, when there was a lot more availability, the vacancy rate was higher. we saw 81% of the transactions done were relocation. As the vacancy rate started to tighten, and last year we saw less, or this year we saw less available office space, we've seen that 14% of people have renewed. But as you saw on the slide before, there hasn't been as much demand. So 5% less, so only 25% of the transactions were new entrants coming to the market, and 39% were expansions, and only 22% relocation. So what that meant was a lot more occupiers stayed where they were this year, renewed and expanded, as opposed to relocating, because there wasn't that much supply and that much availability in the market. And when we talk about market and demand, one of the interesting things is also rental performance. This is the Asia Pacific, different markets in Asia Pacific. Here are the markets that were better than expected. Here are the markets that were in line with expectation. And these are the ones that are lagging behind. One of the things we saw is Ho Chi Minh City in 2014, the rentals performed better than we expected because of supply and demand issues. So what we saw were rental levels increase on average by about 3 to 4%. And in terms of the vacancy rate, we saw the vacancy rate at about 4% on average for Grade A. So the key point there is, although there wasn't much supply, the market was difficult, demand was less, rental levels performed and steadily rose. Again, the question is, what's going to happen next year? Are we going to see rental levels continue to rise, or are they going to drop? So again, just to finalise where we see things going, and the outlook is very important. Again, for the first half of next year, we expect rental levels to be stable. There is no new supply coming online, and nothing really driving demand either down or up, so we expect this stable trend to continue. The next wave of large supply will come online around the middle of next year, almost 45,000 square metres of Grade A office space. So that will be the catalyst. But again, with that space, we still believe rental levels will remain steady. Vacancy rates will start to rise when the new supply comes online as well. And again, one of the things driving demand is really going to be occupiers already in the market and expanding, but more importantly, changes in legislation and regulation. So things like we mentioned, such as the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which should take place this year, and the EU FTA. This is opening the doors for a number of different organisations to come into Vietnam and expand their business, particularly in areas like IT, but more importantly in the sourcing sector, which is a major export market in Vietnam. So there's a quick overview in terms of what we expect to see next year. But again, before we go, one of the things to highlight, we spoke about different buildings, green buildings, and where the demand is. The reason why we're here today in Vincom Centre is this is one example of a building completed in 2010, where a lot of occupiers are finding this is the type of building that meets a number of their needs. Again, the key things a lot of occupiers look for is location, obviously. Being in the centre of town, this is one location, which is, again, optimal for many. The floor plate size, again, when we speak about workplace strategies, an open floor plate size makes workspace a lot more efficient. Again, amenities. A lot of companies will lease office space, not just because of the internal space, but also because of the external surroundings and the environment that creates for their staff in terms of productivity and an area to work. So again, Vincom Centre offers that as a fully integrated service department, office and more, as well with health club facilities too. Again, lastly as well, you're looking in terms of energy efficiency. Again, Vincom Centre is one of the few buildings taking steps towards having more sustainable leases with their tenants and offering more green and energy efficient aspects as well. So again, we hope you found that useful from a market perspective and also in terms of some of the new trends that occupiers are looking for. So we'd like to thank you once again for your time and thank you for coming today. But before we do, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We're happy to answer them for you.
Pham.